In my book, The Tradition of Natural Taoism, I speak about the human reflection of the universe according to the metaphysical cosmology of Tao. Now, before we get into that, if you are interested in my book, I have a link for it in the description and in the pinned comment. And if you're interested in my work and would like to meet me in person, I have 2 upcoming pilgrimages to Nepal in November and to South India in January next year. So if you're interested in those, a link for both of those pilgrimages will be in the pinned comment. Now, getting back to the human reflection of the universe, the metaphysical cosmology of Tao is broken down into many components, but there are 3 core concepts that we need to understand when we understand the macrocosmic level of Tao, right? So the first idea is Wu Qi. Now, Wu Qi is basically Tao in stillness or Tao of nothingness, right? So this is basically the ultimate substratum of the universe. This is the Tao in an unmanifest form, right? And so Wu Qi is the essence of the Tao. Is basically the nature of the Tao is Wu Qi, which is basically Tao in stillness, right? And so this is the first part of the Tao. And then from Wu Qi comes Tai Chi, right? And so Tai Chi is Tao in motion. So this is the first movement out of Wu Qi, right? This is Tao in motion, which comes from nothingness and into everything, right? So everything we are experiencing now in our lives is a result of the Tao of motion, which is Tai Chi. Now, don't confuse Tai Chi here with Tai Chi Chuan, which is the spiritual practice that people will just call Tai Chi. But Tai Chi is basically a philosophy in Taoism, which is alluding to the Tao in motion, right? So the movement of Tao from nothingness into everything. Now, inherent in Tai Chi is yin and yang, the unified mutual opposites, right? That we find in everything, right? Yin is that feminine, earthly, passive quality, and yang is the heavenly, masculine, and active quality, right? And so yin and yang go together, but they are inherent within Tai Chi, right? And so everything in nature has yin and yang within it, and they are the core component of Tai Chi. And so part of the motion of Tai Chi inherently is yin and yang, right? And so yin and yang are the building blocks of the material world around us, right? And so that's what gives birth to the 5 elements. That's what gives birth to the physical universe, and essentially what Lao Tzu would call the 10,000 things, right? So this is the multiplicity of the universe. And so this idea of duality, but you got to remember that everything in essence is still Wu Qi, is still the oneness or the nothingness, if you will, of Wu Qi. And so as Zhuangzi would say, the great sage Zhuangzi, is can you see the infinite in all things, right? He would suggest that. Can you see the infinite in all things? Because everything in essence is Wu Qi, right? And so what you have to understand is Tai Chi is not just actually a movement out to get to Chuangzi's point, right? This idea of seeing the infinite in all things. How do we see that? So we have to remember it's not just a movement out. Tai Chi is bi-directional. So it's also the return. So in texts like the Tao Te Ching and the Zhuangzi, there's always talk about the motion of return. So in our spiritual practice, what we are doing is we are training our awareness to look within, and we're refraining from the external world, the gravitational pull of the external world. The external world has a power over most people and draws their awareness into the external world, the multiplicity of the external world. And we forget in our essence that we're Wu Qi. We are in essence a Tao of stillness, but our consciousness is constantly being drawn into the duality of the world. And so all of our spiritual practices is to train us in this motion of return. This is how we see the infinite in all things, to Zhuangzi's point, right? So we're training our awareness. And obviously this is where practices like Tai Chi Chuan and these type of spiritual practices in Taoism, Qigong, and the whole system of Neigong in general come into play. But it also is related to just other meditation practices as well, right? So you're training your awareness to turn within, and this is the motion of return, right? And so this is what's required for all spiritual aspirants on the path. If we are to understand the Tao in its truest essence as Wu Qi. But this requires us to embody the character of that return, right? To be able to embody that return and that path to Tao. Now, what is that character? We find it all throughout the Tao Te Ching and the Zhuangzi. It is humility. Without humility, we cannot return to the Tao. That's why Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi have such an emphasis on humility. Because essentially, Taoism wants us to refrain from intervening with the world, right? Taoism doesn't want us to interfere with the world. This is the practice of Wu Wei, right? Part of Wu Wei is not just effortless action, it's actually non-interference. So not interfering with the world, allowing the world to be as it will, leaving it alone, because nature just rewrites itself, because that's the path of nature, right? So the job for a spiritual aspirant is to embody humility, to allow the world to be as it will, and to be receptive to the world. And in doing so, that's how we begin to take our first step towards the nature of ourselves, which is Wu Qi according to Taoism. And so essentially, we are a model of that process, right? We are Wu Qi, we are Tai Chi, and we are Yin and Yang at our core. That's who we are. We have all of that within us, which makes us a human reflection of the universe, right? And we have that within us. And so that's why it is important to embody that return, right? Because eventually the universe will retract within itself and will go back into its essential state, which is Wu Qi. But we can do that before the actual physical universe begins to do that, right? The path for us is to embody that process. And so we need to understand that evolutionary aspect from Wu Qi into Yin and Yang and the 10,000 things, and then we have to embody that return, right? And so there are a few verses in the Tao Te Ching that speak about first the process, right? So the process is the Tao begot one, one begot two, two begot three, and three begot the 10,000 things. That's the process, right? That's first of all the process. And then when we talk about the motion of return, Lao Tzu says, empty yourself of everything. Let the mind become still. The 10,000 things rise and fall while the self watches their return. They grow and flourish and then return to the source. Returning to the source is stillness, which is the way of nature. See that last line there. Returning to the source is Wu Qi, which is the way of nature, the essence of Tao, right? So that stillness is still felt within Tai Chi, within the motion of the universe. But it's only those who are at the level of Zhuangzi who can see the stillness and the Tao and the infinite within all things, right? And so then can embody that return, right? And so that's how we become a human model of the universe. And that's what's explained in the Hu Qing, right? In the Hu Qing, Lao Tzu states, a human being is a model of the integration of yin and yang with physical energy manifesting as the body and subtle energy manifesting as the mind and spirit. Further, the ancients referred to these three aspects of the universe as heaven, symbolized by the three solid lines, which is yang, earth, symbolized by the three broken lines, which is yin, and man, symbolized by Tai Chi, which is the integration of yin and yang. See, this Tai Chi aspect is the symbol of yin yang, right? That's the Tai Chi is the symbol of yin yang. That's what it is. And so we are the perfect integration of yin and yang. So this is that process. The Tao begots one, and then, two begots three, and then three becomes the 10,000 things, right? So this is this process. And when I mentioned here the 3 broken lines and the 3 solid lines, this is in relation to the I Ching. And these 3 quotes kind of explain this process of the metaphysical origins of the universe, then the motion of return and the character of return, right? And so what is required is that humility. And this is the path for all spiritual aspirants, for all of us to evolve on the path. And so that's basically what we are in a nutshell according to Taoism. Obviously, there is the philosophy of the 5 phases or the 5 elements, if you will, the Yu Xing, which is another layer of understanding the physical world. But the metaphysical cosmology comes from Yu Qi, Tai Chi, and Yin and Yang, and that is what composes the human model or the human reflection of the entire universe. Shanti, shanti, shanti.